Good afternoon, everyone. We are from the fifth group. In this occasion, we are going to discuss a set. But before we go into the explanation about standardized assessment, let me introduce the member of our group. The first is me. My name is Millatuz Zulfa. Here, I would like to explain about the definition of standardized assessment. And then for the scope of assessment will be delivered by my friends. There are Hermin Wijayanti, Bintang Shofiarizqi, and Amida Fadmawati. First of all, we discuss about the definition of standardized assessment. Standard of assessment is mechanism, procedure, and instrument of assessment in assessing the student's result in learning. It involves authentic assessment, peer assessment, portfolio exam, daily exam, midterm exam, final exam. In Indonesia, the government uses criteria reference assessment or PAK. It is an assessment of competence achievement based on minimum criteria of graduates, or in Bahasa we call it by KKM. KKM is minimum criteria which is determined by school with considering characteristics of core competence. We move to the kinds of assessment. Here, there are some kinds of assessment that's applied in Indonesia. The first is authentic assessment, and then self-assessment, portfolio-based assessment, examination, ulangan harian, midterm examination, ujian akhir semester, ujian tingkat kompetensi or competence level examination, and then competence level. The next is curriculum assessment system. Here, as you can see in the table, there are three columns here. The first is kinds of assessment, and then the tour, and the last is time. The authentic assessment is an assessment which is conducted comprehensively in order to assess from the input, the process, and the output of learning. So the tour here is teacher, and for the time is continually. And then peer assessment. Who should take a role in this assessment? They are students. So here the students should take a role in this assessment. And the time for this assessment is before ulangan harian. The third is project assessment. The tour is teacher, and for the time is after finishing a chapter or a time. And then ulangan harian, midterm or final examination, ujian. After we discuss about the kinds of assessment and the curriculum assessment system, we move to the principles in assessment. Here, there are some principles in assessment based on curriculum 2013. There are 6. The first is objective, and then comprehensive. The third is economical, then transparent, accountable, and the last is educative. The assessment should be objective. It means that it based on real facts and not influenced by personal beliefs or feeling. The second is comprehensive. It means that the assessment should be complete and including everything that is necessary. Then economical. It's not using a lot of money. Then is transparent. This is to ensure that students understand what they are trying to achieve or learn. And the fifth is accountable. It is indeed important when student learning is assessed by beyond standardized testing, which includes supporting. Okay, in these slides, we are going to discuss about scope of assessment. There are 3. The first is knowledge or cognitive assessment, and then attitude or affective assessment, and the last is psychomotor or skill assessment. In the scope of knowledge assessment, there are 3. Written test, oral test, and assignment. And for the attitude, there are observation, self-evaluation, peer assessment, and journal. And for the psychomotor or skill assessment, includes practice test, project, portfolio, and product. The explanation each scope of assessment will be delivered. In Indonesia, the government uses criteria reference assessment or PAK.
In assessing knowledge, The written test instruments are in form of multiple choice, easy, short answer, true or false, and matching. The oral test instrument is in the form of list of questions. An assignment instrument, according to Bloom, the steps of understanding are knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. On the other hand, according to Anderson and Cardwell, the step of there are the categorization of cognitive domains process in learning. There are factual. In Indonesia, they apply KD or kompetensi dasar. In Indonesia, they apply KD or kompetensi dasar. There is the example of an assessment of junior. There is an example of multiple choice. There are the example of multiple choice answer. And there are the categorization of cognitive domains process in learning.
Well, I will continue the next explanation about the technique and instrument in assessing attitude or effective. As we know that attitude started from feelings that related to a student's tendency to respond something or object. Attitude is also an expression of students' values or outlook of life. The attitude competence here means an expression of the values or outlook of life that is owned by students and is realized in behavior. There are some techniques that can be used in assessing students' attitude. Here are the techniques. There are observation, self-evaluation, peer assessment, and journal. First is observation. Observation is an assessment technique which is done continuously and using human sense directly or indirectly by using observation guidance, which contains the indicators about attitude observed. Second is self-evaluation. Self-evaluation is an assessing technique by asking the students to evaluate themselves in context of competence achievement. The instrument used is in form of self-evaluation sheet. Third is peer assessment. Peer assessment is an assessing technique by asking students to assess each other in context of competence achievement. The instrument used is in form of peer assessment sheet. And the last is journal. Journal is a teacher's note inside and outside the class, which contains the information about the result of the observation of students' weakness, which are related to the attitude. As explained in this schema, the effective assessment divided into two: main effective assessment or penilaian sikap utama and supported effective assessment or penilaian sikap penunjang. Here, the main effective assessment is done by teachers' observation or by teachers of all the subjects during one semester. The teacher assesses the student's attitude during the learning process and outside of the class. In addition, another observation is done by wali kelas and guru BK during one semester. This observation is done by the teacher outside the learning process, either directly or by getting valid information. Besides,
Supported effective assessment can be done by using peer assessment and self-evaluation. This kind of effective assessments must be done at least once in a semester. Well, this is an example of observation sheet that can be used by the teacher in assessing students' attitude. The form of the instrument used for observation is an observation guide in the form of a checklist or rating scale that accompanied by the rubric. Checklists are used to observe the presence or absence of an attitude or behavior of the students. Meanwhile, the assessment scale or rating scale determines the position of the attitude or behavior of students in a range of attitudes. As you can see in this example, there are many points that determine the effective assessment, such as tanggung jawab, jujur, peduli, kerjasama, santun, percaya diri, and disiplin. Those indicators are used by the teacher to assess the student's attitude. Then, self-evaluation. This kind of instrument of effective assessment is done by the student itself. This instrument also uses a rating scale, usually Likert scale, to measure the student's attitude by themselves. In this example, there are some indicators that are used in assessing attitude by using self-evaluation technique. The students have to fill this self-evaluation, fill the identity, and give rating scale in every column that consists of the indicators using four choices such as selalu, sering, jarang, and tidak pernah that are represented by the number.
There are the example of multiple choice answer and easy answer.
Here are the techniques. There are observation, self-evaluation, peer assessment, and journal. First is observation. Observation is an assessment technique which is done continuously and using human sense directly or indirectly by using observation guidance, which contains the indicators about attitude observed. Second is self-evaluation. Self-evaluation is an assessing technique by asking the students to evaluate themselves in context of competence achievement. The instrument used is in form of self-evaluation sheet. Third is peer assessment. Peer assessment is an assessing technique by asking students to assess each other in context of competence achievement. The instrument used is in form of peer assessment sheet. And the last is journal. Journal is a teacher's note inside and outside the class, which contains the information about the result of the observation of students' weakness, which are related to the attitude.
Ladies and gentlemen, and then we move to the technique and instrument in assessing skill based on the standardized tests. We know that we can use some rubrics and aspects to measure our student skills. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we are moving on the assessment in standardized tests that will be used to assess student skills. Here, in assessing skills of standardized tests, we know that there are a lot of research and experience, so that standardized tests are generally good at measuring students' knowledge, skills, and understandings about objective, fair, efficient, and comprehensive. Talking about skill in standardized tests, we know that student performance is a crucial element that should be assessed when we want to know the ability, the competence, and the capability of the students itself. And as we know that there are a lot of countries have applied the importance of standardized achievement tests, which have become an increasingly prominent part of public schooling in some countries. The first point is to hold schools and educators to maintain the results and students' performance. In this case, test scores are used as a measure of effectiveness, and low scores may trigger a variety of consequences for schools and teachers. The second point is to evaluate whether the students have learned what they are expected to learn, such as whether they have met the stage of learning standards. In this case, test scores are seen as representative indicator of student achievement and ability. The third one is to identify gaps in student learning and academic progress. It will focus on the test scores that may be used along with other information about students to diagnose and to look for the learning needs so that the teachers can provide and apply appropriate services, instruction, academic support, technique, media, and another additional learning material. Standardized tests in assessing skill is also used to identify the achievement gaps among the different students group, which is it can lead to greater public awareness and changes in educational policies and programs. It means that the government and the teacher should know what kind of curriculum or another set of teaching learning process that appropriate to be applied in this country. And to determine whether educational policies are working as intended, it is related to the previous point that the educational policies should be aware about what kind of policies and law that have been applied in the country, especially in the schools, because we know that the government should compare the educational performance from school to school or state to state to increase and to develop the progress of the teaching and learning process. Now we move to various assessments that can be used to evaluate or to measure the students' skills in standardized tests. The first one is practice test, the second one is project, the third one is portfolio, and the last is product. In practice test or practice exam, we can use this to assess the student's performance as an informal examination that can be used to prepare for an actual or formal examination. The teacher can provide a proper activity based on the competence that will be assessed. In this practice exam, the teacher should protect students' confidentiality. in order to use the assessment results to make decisions about students' educational placement, promotion, and graduation, as well as to make judgment about class and school improvement. And the second one is project assessment. In project assessment, when we want to assess the skills in our students, we will focus on a course or unit that is used to teach students engagement in problem solving and exploration. The project assessment will give us some reflection about the process and the content that to be meaningful to assess our student skills. When we use project assessment, we have to give the students about some topic, problems, and the direction of their work in order to make it personally meaningful. If the students are working in groups, we have to make sure that we have a way to assess individual learning rather than just giving a shared grade on the final product. And then we move to the portfolio assessment. In portfolio assessment to assess our student skills, it will related to the potential of portfolios to assess student performance and curriculum outcomes. Related to attitudes and professionalism is the major point for the use of portfolio assessment. We can use various assessment tools, namely tutor rating scales, peer ratings, and patient feedback that can be included in the portfolio to provide evidence of the student's performance. Especially, we use portfolio to assess the learning outcomes of the curriculum. The attraction of the portfolio is that it can include evidence of achievement of all the learning outcomes within its structure in our students' skills. And the last one is product assessment. Product assessment is a kind of assessment to measure student skills in making or creating product. It will give us a suggestion for a variety of products to be used within performance-based lessons. The products are grouped by learning style. The learning style are analytical understanding, such as memo, newspaper, play, and test. And the second one is community service, such as awareness, advocate. And the third one is oral, such as debate, interview, and story. And the last one is visual. It is about drawing relating to students' topic, poster, and map that can be assessed through product assessment. In assessing student skills, the teachers have to apply the appropriate instruments or aspects so they can gain or reach the goal of the learning process. For instance, there are 3 instruments to assess student skills. The first one is the teachers have to know what kind of competence that they will use to assess student skills, because we know that the students have to complete a specific competence that can be assessed in the skills performance. The second one is the instruction, the construction, and the evaluation of the technical requirement should be proper and relevant about the instrument use. And for the last one is the communicative skills or communicative competence is needed to develop and increase the students' achievement. And ladies and gentlemen, we move on the techniques that can be applied to assess our student skills. The first one is practice. Practice can be used to assess the process of skills in our students. And product, we can use product assessment to assess the students' creativity through technology and arts. And for the project assessment, we can take a look at students' ability and competence about how they solve the problem and also assess their critical thinking skills. And the last one is portfolio. We use portfolio to obtain and to increase the skill competence in one semester. When we assess the student skills in standardized tests, we know that performance assessment is a pivotal thing that can be used by students to demonstrate and understand or apply the knowledge in many contexts. Skills and performance assessments require students to finish their complex and significant tasks, to bring their prior knowledge, recent learning, and relevant skills to solve the realistic and the authentic problems. It will also related to the criteria needed in everyday life practices. And we also can use the same about the assessment of skills in one semester. For instance, we can use competency dasar or basic competence in 4.1 about the practice. 4.2, we still use practice assessment, and we move to the 4.3 and 4.4 that we try to apply the project assessment, portfolio assessment, and also product assessment. And still in basic competence or competency dasar in 4.5, we can still apply the product assessment and portfolio assessment as the follow-up of the previous assessment. And the last one in 4.6, we also can use product assessment and portfolio assessment as the final measurement in student skills. And now we can take a look at the rubrics of the skills assessment in standardized tests. The first one is practice test. We know that there are scales between 0 up to 4. There are categories that can be applied and used to assess and evaluate our student skills. In practice tests, we can measure whether the student have understood about the concept and the knowledge about how to they complete and finish the task. And now we move to the project assessment. In project assessment, we can take a look at students' written product about how they deliver their written text, how they think, and how they solve the problem about the project assessment. In project assessment, we also can measure the students' working group, such as how they deliver their creativity, their activeness, and their problem solving together in order to complete the task of project assessment. In project assessment, we can measure the ability of students' strategy and preparation about how they deliver the idea, thoughts, feeling, and also interpret the data and the information that they have written on the project assessment. And then we move to the portfolio rubrics, that is a purposeful collection of student works that exhibits the students' effort, progress and achievement in one or more areas of the curriculum. We have to know that in assessing portfolio skills, we have to consider about students' participation in selecting contents. We have to know the criteria for selection, criteria for judging merits, and evidence of a student's self-reflection. For instance, we can use score and give reason why they get those scores, such as 100 is very good, 80 is good, and etc. When we look at the rubrics or of the portfolio, we can know that we use portfolio to encourage self-directed learning, enlarge the view of what is learned, fostering learning about materials, demonstrate progress toward identified outcomes, create an intersection for instruction and assessment, and provide a way for students to value themselves as learners. That's why we use score to measure and identify the student's skills by using this portfolio.
As explained in this schema, the effective assessment divided into two: main effective assessment or penilaian sikap utama and supported effective assessment or penilaian sikap penunjang. Here, the main effective assessment is done by teachers' observation or by teachers of all the subjects during one semester. The teacher assesses the student's attitude during the learning process and outside of the class. In addition, another observation is done by wali kelas and guru BK during one semester. This observation is done by the teacher outside the learning process, either directly or by getting valid information. Besides, supported effective assessment can be done by using peer assessment and self-evaluation. This kind of effective assessments must be done at least once in a semester.
Next, we would like to show you an example of a lesson plan and the assessment on it. For the full file, you can click the hyperlink below. In this lesson plan, the material is about greetings. From the A1 and 2, it's about attitude standard that should be mastered by students in each meeting. KI3 is the standard of knowledge that should be understood in this material, while KI4 is some skill standard that should be mastered by students. In the assessment form, the teacher used observation assessment, self-assessment, and peer assessment to assess the student's attitude. While in this observation assessment, the teacher used the aspect of cooperate, honest, responsible, and disciplined. But actually, the teacher can change the aspect based on their need which one to be assessed. Then is a self-assessment which consists of an instrument like a questionnaire to assess the student's attitude based on the competency. And this score can be calculated by scoring positive and negative statements. Peer assessment. In this assessment, students are asked to assess their friend's attitude during the lesson or the group task. Next, we would like to show you an example of a lesson plan and the assessment on it. For the full file, you can click the hyperlink below. In this lesson plan, the material is about greetings. From the A1 and 2, it's about attitude standard that should be mastered by students in each meeting. KI3 is the standard of knowledge that should be understood in this material, while KI4 is some skill standard that should be mastered by students. And this is the example of the rubric of practice test. The teacher can ask the students to do the role play, simulation, presentation, or monologue practice to check the student's skill in speaking or reading or presentation. The last is portfolio assessment. In this example, the teacher used an essay to check the student's writing skill. The aspect that should be assessed is the student's grammatical, the student's word choice, and writing system. While for practice tests, the teacher also assesses the student's speaking skill. Teacher can assess through the pronunciation, intonation, fluency, and accuracy. Then, based on the result of the assessment above, the teacher do the evaluation for the students, whether doing enrichment or remedial.
Okay, that's all the presentation from our group, and thank you for listening.